Hi, I'm Jenna Lane, your Bucs insider for SportsTalkFlorida.com. The Bucs had a wild first week of free agency, and we talked about that in the last video, going through all the defensive players that they signed. So now let's get to the offense, starting with quarterback Josh McCown. I had a lot of people reach out to me on social media asking me for my thoughts on this signing. And personally, I think it was the right move. General Manager Jason Licht said he did not want this team to be pigeonholed when it came time to draft. And when you look at that, the Bucs are drafting 7th overall, with at least 4 teams ahead of them that have needs at the quarterback position. So who's to say that a quarterback could fall in their laps? I think they made the right decision in going after McCown, a guy that Dietrich-Smith worked with in Chicago. He knows him, knows his day-to-day work habits, and several members of this staff have also worked with him. And you look at what they were able to get him for. 2 years, $10 million, essentially the same deal that Matt Castle got with the Vikings. I thought it was a wise move. Now, who's to say that maybe if a quarterback does fall into the Bucs' lap at 7, they wouldn't take that guy? Although Dietrich-Smith did say this is going to be their starter. Now, moving along, left tackle Anthony Collins was another player that this team signed. I've heard a lot of positive things about Collins, at least in the things that I've read. I know that he's graded well on some of the sites like Pro Football Focus, but I have one concern when it comes to him, and that is in his transition from a backup into a full-time starter. I've heard from a number of folks who have worked with him in Cincinnati that sometimes he took plays off and didn't always give all-out effort. That can happen at the left tackle position, one of the premier positions on an offense. So I'm expecting him, this offense might essentially, or at least this offensive staff, might need to ride him a little bit in practice. But overall, from a talent standpoint, I thought this was a good move. The Bucs also addressed another position on the offensive line with guard and center Evan Dietrich-Smith, who they signed from the Packers. This might clue you into another move that they're going to make with Jeremy Zuttah. We don't know if they will or not, but Zuttah does count $4.5 million against the cap this year. Sure, he's a very versatile player, but if they're not as high on him as, say, the previous coaching regime was, I could see them parting ways with him as well. They signed Dietrich-Smith to a pretty reasonable deal, too, and they're getting a lot of versatility as well. He can start again at both guard and center. I think he moves over and becomes the starting center. Last but not least, the Bucs signed tight end Brandon Myers from the Giants. Now, a lot of fans I know are more enamored with the sexy tight ends like Jimmy Graham, but that's not really what a Dietrich-Smith offense is all about. They're looking more for a complete tight end, more of the Zach Miller type of guy that Seattle has rather than a vertical threat. And that's what Brandon Myers is able to bring to the table here. I think this was a good move as well. So overall, I think the Bucs had a very active and a good free agency, addressing a ton of key areas. I'm convinced they're not done, however. I still think that they could go after a cornerback who fits a little bit more of what Dietrich-Smith is, again, trying to do with the defense, more of a zone type of a corner. Could even be a smaller guy who's a little bit quicker rather than a lengthier guy like a Jonathan Banks. I still think he's a part of this defense's future, but I don't think that they're done there. And they also have really apparent needs at the wide receiver position. That's my only criticism of what they've been able to do in free agency. They weren't able to land Emmanuel Sanders. Julian Edelman re-signed with the Patriots. They weren't able to get Steve Smith. So that's my only knock. Ted Ginn Jr. as well, they weren't able to land him. So that's my only knock on this free agency. But thankfully, there's still a little bit of time left, or actually a lot of time left. And then you have the draft coming up. It's quite deep at that position. Reporting with Sports Talk Florida, I'm Jenna Lane.